Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Café Muse's 2022 annual DC Area Literary Translators Program, or DC Alt for short. Thank you, Michael Davis, for sharing your classical guitar, so soothing, and Henry Crawford for your lovely photos across America. I'm Renee Garrity, and I'll be co-hosting this evening with the one and only Barbara Goldberg. In a few moments, she will introduce our featured poet translators, Sharon Dolan and Katerina Stoikova. We've left enough time in the 1 hour program for Barbara to lead a few Q&As at the end. We won't be able to get to all of them, but we'll do the best we can. There are a few items to mention before we begin. During the reading, you may use the chat feature to comment or to ask questions for the poets to answer during the Q&A. We've muted your microphones so the inevitable sounds of a dog bark or a doorbell don't interrupt the program. Please bear with us if we do encounter a technical glitch. If we do, we'll be right back or fix it real soon. If you have difficulty hearing the poets, you can use Zoom's closed caption feature. To use it, there's a gray box at the bottom of the screen labeled CC. Click the gray box and then choose Show Subtitles. And the closed captions will appear at the bottom of the screen. As you know, publishers don't provide 401ks or vacation time to our poets. So we encourage you to buy their books, and we'll put a link in the chat that will send you directly to the site so you can do just that. Also, Café Muse is a nonprofit organization with an all-volunteer team. We encourage you also to donate to Café Muse in support of its literary programs. We'll put a donation link in the chat for that also. So Barbara Goldberg, what can I say about my fascinating, energetic, prolific, funny co-host, Barbara Goldberg? Well, a short answer is that she's authored 7 prize-winning books of poetry. Her most recent is Breaking and Entering, New and Selected Poems, published by our very own WordWorks 2022. Her book, The Royal Baker's Daughter, won the Felix Pollock Poetry Prize, and Transformation, the Poetry of Translation, won Valentin Krustov's Translation Award. She and the renowned Israeli poet Moshe Dor edited numerous anthologies of contemporary Israeli poetry, one of which was After the First Rain, Israeli Poems on War and Peace. Barbara received various awards, including 2 fellowships from the National Endowment of Arts, as well as the Armand G. I can't say that very well, award from Columbia University's Translation Center. Her work appears in numerous journals, such as Best American Poetry, Paris Review, Poetry, the Gettysburg Review, to name a few. And last but not least, she is the series editor for the international edition of our WordWorks. As a musing aside, she graduated Phi Beta Kappa in philosophy from Mount Holyoke. Who knew philosophy? Wow. Okay. That's just a tidbit of her accomplishments. And so now I'd like to turn the program over to Barbara Goldberg. Welcome, Barbara.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. One thing you left out, Renee, I have a naked woman on every book cover.
I'm sorry.
Of the 7. Anyway, I really love this reading, the annual translation reading. And tonight, we'll be traveling to Bulgaria and Catalonia. And why do people travel in the first place? It's for the exotic, for the foreign, but also because they like seeing different sights, experiencing different mindsets, different climates. But poets love to travel too. And a lot of times you can travel through translation. And that's why I think so many poets do it, even poets who are poets in their own right, not just translators. And I hope someone's going to ask in the Q&A why poets would choose to translate if they're all instead of or in addition to writing their own poetry. And I have two firm beliefs. One is the best, you don't have to be a poet to translate, but to translate poetry, you have to be a poet. And that's because it calls on all the same skills to that you bring to poetry to translate a poem. And also that the best poem is not necessarily the most accurate, but the one that sounds as though it were written in English. And that's not so easy to do because it has to sound natural and not clunky and all those things. Interestingly, our two poet translators tonight are very active in the publishing world. Katerina Stoikova launched Accent Books, which she built from the ground up and now has 80 titles. And she calls it, how did she describe it? An independent press for brilliant voices. And I'm happy to say I'm one of those brilliant voices. No, it's just because she published one of my books. And Sharon is associate editor of Barrow Street Press. First, we'll hear from Katerina. She was born in Bulgaria by the Black Sea and presently lives in Lexington, Kentucky. Her mother tongue is Bulgarian, but she's lived here long enough so that she can translate both ways, and she can even translate her own poems from English to Bulgarian or Bulgarian to English. And so you say how some people are ambidextrous. I guess you could say it's ambilingual. Among her many chapeaus, software engineer, poet, editor, radio host, publisher, actor, and among her degrees are engineering, computer science, an MBA, and an MFA. All these skills came into play as she built up Accents Publishing. And I mentioned it has 80 books on the list. Among her poetry books are How God Punishes, through Broadstone Books. The Bulgarian version won the Ivan Nikolov National Poetry Prize. Her two anthologies are Bigger Than They Appear, an anthology of very short poems, and The Season of Delicate Hunger, which is an anthology of contemporary Bulgarian poet, from which she'll read tonight. Katerina.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Renee, Henry, and everybody who has had anything to do with setting up of this lovely event. And Sharon, can't wait to hear your reading and to learn more about your work. And thank you, everybody who has come here tonight to listen to our translations. This is so special. It's an honor. And Barbara, thank you so much for this introduction. Barbara mentions The Season of Delicate Hunger, Anthology of Contemporary Bulgarian Poetry. Here it is, this book. I spent about 3 years of my life reading, selecting, translating and editing and ultimately publishing this book through my press. I'm very happy to have it as a reality. And I was wondering, what can I read from that book for you today? And I chose 3 poets of various ages. And the first one is actually the first poet in the book, and that is Ekaterina Yosipova. She was born in 1941 in the town of Kyustendil. She is maybe one of the best known alive living Bulgarian poets right now. She's a beloved author of, I would say, probably about 15 books of poetry right now. She has been translated in about dozen languages, and recently she had a book published in France of selected poems. Gibbons, you have an axe and an island. The island has a tree, just enough to carve out a canoe. You enter the canoe. You push away from the shore with the strongest branch of the former tree. A suitable current picks up the canoe and stops it on the shore of the continent. You start living there. No, not on the shore, in the city. The boat has rotted long ago. You don't know the name. You don't ask of that island, nor of that tree. She's not an immigrant, but doesn't this poem sound just like she knows about the experience? White snake. And if I just imagine what I would do were I the conscious reptile, that is to say, I would pick the apple, I wouldn't hand it over to any ignorant female, much less to Adam, then I would start eating alone, bit by bit. Consciousness, knowledge, awareness. She's amazing. I mean, she always goes to the most important and highlights it in a unique way. And she has lovely sense of humor. So let's talk about geography. You don't need to know geography. The issue wasn't in the translation. They simply did not want to believe that the country their army had occupied preemptively wasn't next to their border and was even on a different continent. We showed them the map. They looked at it. The girl asked, "Is this map Bulgarian?" They smirked. Everything made sense to them again. I'll read to you one more poem by Ekaterina Yosifova. And I think this one is particularly funny and sarcastic, and it has to do with aging. Shoot. Shoot through the pocket of the cardigan, the one with slatternly stitching. You shoot in the air, upward from below, in the bustle. Nobody glances at you. Nobody suspects you. Nobody remembers you. It's very convenient to be an old woman. So the next poet that I would like to read poems from is Christine Dimitrova. She is a poet, also she's a fiction writer. She just published a new novel in Bulgarian. She actually has several books translated in English. So if you like these poems, maybe you can find a couple of volumes in English. She was born in 1963 in Sofia, and she lives there right now. And she's one of those poets who very heavily leans on the reader to know mythology and religion. So this first poem is called Noah, the Carrier. Noah told it differently. To the Jewish delegation, he said that he freed the pigeon and it brought back a branch. The pigeon is the white herald of joy. It is the pure soul of the innocent and foretells the beginning of a new life. The forefathers approved the story and adopted it. To Gilgamesh, however, he'd spoken like this: I freed a pigeon, but it returned. I freed a swallow, same thing. Finally, I freed a crow and never saw it again. Then I realized it had discovered both loot and land. The crow is the black warrior among the birds, flying against the good sky. It is the first witness of the last transformation. Gilgamesh understood this language. When he was alone, Noah said to himself, there is no way. Truth does not make a good legend, yet legend is truth's only carrier. He clearly remembered it was actually the flies that found the ship. So let's read a poem called Perseus. And it's written in the form of a conversation. It's a dialogue. Who taught you to look into the shield? Athena. And who put in your hands the sickle not meant for harvesting wheat? Hermes. Who did you get the magic helmet from? From Hades. I see you have powerful friends. Well, yes, it's true. And actually, Medusa, get ready, for I've come for your head. Monsters like you must not live. I'm not the only one who thinks this way. Everyone agrees. Besides, it was predicted that I would become a hero. Perseus, said the psychic, you will become a hero. Now, give me 2 golden coins. Let's see if they disappear into the basin. And what do you know? They disappeared. The future belongs to us, the heroes. Go ahead, son. Chop off my head so I don't have to look at your oafish face. So let's hear a poem called Theseus. Was this his breathing or the wind flying through the hallways? Theseus swung and his sword clanged against another's. Sparks flared. Theseus saw the Minotaur and didn't understand the gods. The Minotaur saw Theseus and was astounded. What? You've come to fight, yet some woman is pulling your string? And he laughed wholeheartedly. Theseus halved him amidst his laughter. And the last poem I'm going to read from Christine Dimitrova is called Persephone. I've read so many poems about Persephone that I jokingly came up with a rule that half of the year we shouldn't be writing poems about Persephone. So, but here is this one. This is my favorite Persephone poem. If you have another one that you like, feel free to send it to me. Persephone. Mom, don't look for me anymore. Here in the darkness, I already know I won't let you stuff me back into your womb. It's true, I hate him. He's mixed up in terrible things, but I ate from the pomegranate and don't be mad, I liked it. Please, please leave me alone. Everyone brings his own fears to fruition. Christine Dimitrova. And the last poet that I'm going to read translations of his work is Marin Budakov. He was my friend. He was everybody's friend. He was friend of poetry and literature and culture in Bulgaria. And he tragically died very suddenly just a few months after he became 50 years old, and then it was a very big loss for everybody. And right now I'm working on translating a book-length project of his, and I will read kind of translations that haven't been overly edited, so please be lenient. And because he has very short poems, I'm going to read them first in Bulgarian and then in English. Not all of them, but some. Има сбогувания като петно на покривката. Предърпваш чинията върху него, докато другият не е забелязал. Мислиш единствено за това. Certain goodbyes resemble a stain on a tablecloth. You drag the plate to cover it before the other notices. That's all you think about. It is so relatable, right? It is 5 short lines, and he says so much. And I don't know anybody else who has described quiet like that particular human condition. Another poem. Tonight, too, I stuttered uncontrollably. Identical, disjoint syllables kept spilling out of my mouth. I want to live my own life. These were the exact words I wanted to say. Then, behind the trash can, I secretly ate food I cast deeply into the trash can and covered up and covered up. Нищо не донесе зрелостта, само нападали столове, неогладено пране и на финала, за да поправи впечатлението, по-малко тайни срещи, повече тайни раздели. Maturity brought nothing, only tipped chairs, wrinkled laundry, and at the end, as a saving grace, fewer secret rendezvous, more secret breakups. Passing manifesto. So many wars, and all enemy sides appeal to you to side with them, to arm with their outrage, to adopt their fears. So many dirty wars with no positive characters, just righteous ones you can barely catch up with. As many shameful fake wars as all these masterful attempts to derail you from your own tiny, laughable war, from the shrapnel of the buttercup and the munition of the crocus, to forget that you shoot solely towards the sky and never against people, to forget why you are striding stooped towards the lighthouse, since you have no ship. Заспиваш с зъб, събуждаш се без зъб, изял си го. И така, нощ след нощ, докато езикът остане напълно сам, като улично осветление, забравено включено през деня. Falling asleep, you have a tooth. Waking up, you don't. You've eaten it. This continues night after night until your tongue remains completely alone, like a forgotten street lamp left on during daylight. До моя роден дом са отворили музей на илюзиите. Защо сте сам? За някои илюзии са необходими двама. Обичайно не позволявам тук да се влиза по един. Поканете някой да ви придружи. Next to my childhood home, a museum of illusions was opened. Why are you by yourself? Certain illusions need a couple. Normally, I don't allow people on their own. Invite someone to accompany you. Isn't that chilling? I think it's chilling. And one last poem by Marin Budakov that is called Trolley Number 2. On the seat next to me, a 3 or 4-year-old angel wearing Ushanka hat for the last few stops keeps on asking the question, Daddy, why wouldn't you talk to me? Daddy, why wouldn't you talk to me? Daddy, why wouldn't you talk to me? Then leans his forehead on the glass, and so pass nearly 2 millennia. The trolley reaches their stop. Daddy wordlessly stretches out a hand. They get off. Myself and forgive me, humanity remain in our seats. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Really appreciate the opportunity to read these translations.
Thanks, Katerina. I love these poems. They're kind of dark in an Eastern European way. And I'm reminded with the short ones what Charles Simic once said, don't try to change the way you write, just do what you're doing anyway, but do it better. So those short ones, you know, that have a world within and millennia.
Yes.
I really enjoyed the work. And now we'll hear from Sharon, and she's authored 6 books of poetry. Her 7th, Imperfect Present, is due out this fall from the University of Pittsburgh Press. Her prose memoir, is called Hitchcock Blonde. And I don't know if that's Sharon or not, but could be. And her most recent translated book is the Saturnalia Prize-winning book, Late to the House of Words, Selected Poems by Gemma Gorga, translated from the Catalan and shortlisted for the 2022 Griffin Poetry Prize. Sharon lives in New York City, where she is associate editor of Barrow Street Press. I hope during your reading, you'll talk about the title of that, Late to the House of Words. Seems to have special meaning for Gemma. Okay, go.
Thank you so much. It's really a treat to be here. Thank you to Henry and Renee. And it was great to hear you, Katarina, reading from these wonderful Bulgarian poets and to hear the language too. And thank you, Barbara, for inviting me. This is such a thrill. So I'm going to limit, I did publish a book of translations of prose poems of Gemma Gorga, but because this is the most recent book, Late to the House of Words, I'm going to read just from this book because it actually has 6 different of her books selected within it. And the title comes from the first poem that I will read. So it will become clear. I will say that Gemma Gorga, she was born in Barcelona in 1968, and she teaches at the University of Barcelona, medieval and Renaissance Spanish literature. And she's published 7 books of poetry. She's published literary criticism. She's published 2 memoirs, and she's done translations herself of an Indian poet and also of Ed Hirsch. She's done a translation from English into Catalan. And I just came to her work. I am not a professional translator. I came to it and I decided to translate it out of, as I tell people, out of love and chutzpah. I just wanted to be able to read her work. I found it in an anthology, and the only way that I could read more than what was in the anthology was to translate it. And I did the prose poems called Book of Minutes, and then I went on to translate selections from all of her other collections that are written in verse. So here's the opening poem. The one that I have is a proem to the collection. And it contains the phrase that I then chose for the title. Mirror, mirror on the wall. We showed up late to the house of words. Now we grope our way downstairs as painful as vertebrae and search between the walls' plastered shards for some living syllable, sister to bread and poverty, to bring to our lips, such as a name, a woman's name, the bone of a woman's name lost between the stones of these walls that once upon a time housed flesh inside, and perhaps a jewel, a little box, a mirror you could ask so many things. And this is the first reading because Barbara did ask that we read at least one poem in Catalan. I'm going to attempt. You should realize I'm not a native speaker. I'm doing the best I can, but you'll get some sense of the flavor of the language. It is a separate Romance language, probably closest to Provençal. So closer to French and Italian actually than to Spanish. And if you know Romance language, you might hear words that you know. So here it is. This is the mirror, mirror on the wall. Diga mirai, vam feitar a la casa de las paraulas y ara baixem a las palpentas scalas adoloridas com vértebres y busquem entre el calçobre alguna síl·laba viva, germana del pa i la penúria, per dur-nos als llavis, com ara un nom de dona, l'os d'un nom de dona extraviat entre les pedres d'aquests murs que un dia foren habitats carn endins. I potser un joiell, una capseta, un mirall a qui poder preguntar tantes coses. It's really a very unique language. And I hope you can hear the sound of it. I don't think it has any particular difficulties in translating other than you have in any Romance language, which is that you have a much greater ease of rhyming, but there's only one poem in her collection. Actually, I'm not going to read it because it's so uncharacteristic of her. There's only one poem in the selected that I did that actually rhymes. And of course, I had to resort to sometimes off rhymes, assonance, consonants, that sort of thing. So this is a poem that is more autobiographical of hers about her father. It's an early poem and it's called Stones. If a voice could emerge from photographs the way a shadow or tenderness does, despite there being more vulnerable realities, I would hear once more my father explaining to me that before picking up a stone, I should roll it over with my foot or a branch to scare off any scorpions hiding underneath like dry thorns. But I didn't worry about it, because being 6 years old was simple as dying. In either case, it's no more secretive than the air, to inhale or not to inhale, as if the soul were filled with tiny alveoli that open and close. The first scorpion I ever saw was inside a book about the natural sciences, trapped forever between the severe pincers of time. Sometimes, though, books don't tell the whole truth, as if they didn't know or had forgotten on the way to the printer. Arachnid whose body is divided into an abdomen and cephalothorax. No mention was made of the sun burning the tongue, of fear, of the thorn piercing the neck. I didn't know then that words are enormous icebergs hiding under glacial waters much more than they show, like the word scorpion. Now, as the phone insistently rings, morning's harsh cry, as I awaken, turn on the light, bring my hand to its white plastic body that shines like a stone in the sun, as I pick it up and say, yes, and someone says, you are dead, I just think about scorpions and what you wanted to tell me when you repeated, roll over the stones, please roll over the stones. I think that's an important poem of hers. And as you can see, there's an interest in language itself, in words, in the dictionary. And it's what attracted me, one of the things that attracted me to her work. I think it's something that I do in my own poetry. So I felt an affinity for her work. This is called Semantics and Nutrition, and one of my favorites. The leaf falls to the ground and decomposes into smaller meanings: moisture, pigment, lamina, oxygen, heat, light. The way someone spells out their full name to a stranger: carbon dioxide. Nothing is lost along the way, neither its conversations with the night rain, nor flying lessons given by birds. It all decomposes into smaller units, directly assimilated by patient ants, the silent mouths of the forest. That's why the language of the wind also comes to be spoken underground. That's why worms try on wings and fly away, turned into butterflies. Everything is matter. Everything is transformed into flight when a simple leaf falls to the ground. So this one is specifically about the dictionary and the order of words in the dictionary. And I had to take some liberties because of course the words are going to be different from one language to another. This is called In Alphabetical Order. I leaf through the dictionary at random. Who has planted calendula next to calendar? Lilies by the lintel of the page. Words shed their shoes as they should to celebrate the Sabbath. Trenchant is not that far away from trenches, nor is mortality from marble, nor leaves from lead, which makes them fall beyond their meaning. I pass my fingers over the dusty spines of memory and search for a rule that lets me order the disorder. Please tell me, under which letter do I need to look for you? Yarrow, yaw, yawp, you, and the final U is a Y-E-W. So it's the homophone, you know, it's the homophone of the homonym of the Y-O-U. This one, I guess I think of it as something of a summer poem, and it's a little bit different. It's called Little Fairy Tale. It's not one that I usually read. Little Fairy Tale. The bee drew near my lips to dictate the beginning of a poem found by chance among the sweet syllables of the orange blossom. It would have been easy to close my eyes and nod if it weren't for the fact that no one had ever taught me to accept a miracle. I know perfectly well how to hold my hands to receive a poisoned apple. I know how to tilt my head, my neck to feel the slow red nibble of night, how cruelty accumulates in the depths of all mirrors. What are hands for if not for taking and offering? How to open them properly to accept the unexpected gift. The next day, it's always too late. The bee has gone. No flowers remain on any orange tree, and the syllables haven't found the right order for a happy ending. So it's always about writing. So many of her poems really seem to be about language, about writing, and I love them. This is called Direction of Growth. Flowers, fedoras, fingernails, and doors grow outward. If they ever grew inward, it would pierce Earth's tunnel of pain, pain known by caverns, roots, ears, and women who have learned how to grow inward. So this is a memory poem, and it's also set in summer. And there are a number of poems in one of her books about the death of both of her grandmothers. Obviously, they've been imaginatively recreated. It's called Embryo. All morning, pitting the apricots to make marmalade. All morning, opening them to remove the swollen, warm ovum that grows inside the flesh. Scattering of silent apricots gutted on the antiseptic kitchen counter. As if she were head nurse, Grandma sets the pot to boil with 2 fingers of sugared water. The girl runs in and pockets what nobody else wants. Under the white blessing of the myrtle tree, she rubs the woody pit against the wall's lascivious bumps, and she hears a languid whistle rising from the depths of the unborn embryo, from the afternoon rising up, from blood rising, from doubt rising up, years to come, years to unbecome. And this is one, again, I don't usually read, but I love it. She has many poems about the dictionary, or I should say several. I don't want to say there are that many. And I had to play around to get the sound at the very end of the poem, and I had to change the meaning a little bit. Kaleidoscope. I turn the capricious kaleidoscope of the dictionary between my fingers. Sometimes a poem appears, radial and symmetrical, carrying my frame of mind. Sometimes I wonder if it won't be the other way around, if it won't be my frame of mind to adapt symmetrically to the words received, deceived, retrieved, to say. Okay, this is one about, I think, one of her grandmothers. It's called Who Was She? She had a crucifix at the head of her bed, and she wasn't a believer. A busted suitcase in a corner of her bedroom, and she crossed no border. An apron pocket full of candies, and she had no sweet tooth. A lavender lipstick matching the shade of her skin, and 2 cashmere blouses. But she never left the slow, inclined orbit of mourning. All these things she had. Who was she? If only I knew how to look for her in whatever she didn't have. I just love that idea of how do you really know somebody? Searching for them in what they didn't have and what they weren't, as well as in what they were. And this one to me is something that speaks to this moment, which for me feels very elegiac, even though it was written pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, pre all of the craziness of the last several years. It just feels like it captures the mood of now, and it's called Elegy. Long ago, before the continents were divided and we began counting our lives in years, it was still possible to pick up a pin, prick a hole in the porous shell, and joyfully suck the embryonic yellow of the yolk mixed with the egg white's moist light. A journey through secret tunnels displaced matter and food from one concavity to another, from the slippery darkness of beginnings to the definitive darkness of the throat. That was a long time ago, when hens laid eggs in the improvised shadow of 4 planks, when dogs gnawed on carcasses and Sunday leftovers and seemed happy, when bacteria hadn't colonized all the meridians of fear. Microscopes slept, and we ate in peace the simple fruit of the earth. And I want to close by reading some very short poems that are at the end of the book that are from her last book of poems, which I've also translated in full, and they will go by rather quickly. This first one is called Radiance. The more I write, the more invisible I become, erasing myself with stunning intensity. And I'm going to read this one because it's so short in Catalan as well, so you hear the language once more. Fulgo, com més escric, més invisible em torno, m'esborro amb meravellosa intensitat. Venomous species, also about language. Venomous species. Words are this collection of tiny seeds stored under the tongue. At any moment, the possibility exists of spitting one out and killing someone. Likewise, of swallowing one and dying. And now these are the last 2 poems. Illumination. 12 noon, and the bee lights up like a pinch of sulfur, ignites like a fine filament at the heart of the solar light bulb. Does she know you usually pay for so much light with death? And finally, one of my favorites from this collection, it's called Decreation. Learn from crabs this peaceful art of going backwards. Learn to unlearn, go shoeless, digress, surprise yourself yet again. Look at an apple until you liberate it from the fine dust of allegory. Know nothing about what you should know. Forget artificial rhetoric and the boring mechanics of the atom. Look without saying, I am looking. Love without saying, I am loving. Leave verses unfinished. Leave verses. Leave. Thank you very much.
Wow. Lovely. And the work was so different from, I mean, the Bulgarian and this woman is like fabulous and really quite something. I hope we have some questions from the audience, although I don't really see any unless someone else has found some. Someone else going to look, because I have some. And that is, Katerina, I guess you knew all the poets personally that you read tonight, right?
No, I didn't. I did invite some personally, but many of them I just issued a call for submissions, and then I selected from the submissions, and I wanted people who are alive and active in the current literary community.
Right.
So many of them I didn't know, but the 3 people that I read, I did.
Well, actually, that was something I wanted to ask both of you. Sharon, you obviously knew Gemma, right?
Not until I began translating. And again, it was this love and chutzpah. I read initially, again, this book of prose poems that I also completed. And that was my first project. And I said to her, I wrote to her, I just found her email and I said, I'd love to translate this book. Is that okay with you? I had to get
Every poet's dream. I want phone calls. People, they're dying to translate me. Go ahead.
So I didn't know her beforehand. And we did sit in the garden there in Jiwar, this residence this artist residence where I discovered her work. And we did look at some things together because I was really new to Catalan. I was really just learning it, and she knew enough English. She could sort of help me a little bit. But actually she did very little in terms of any kind of input with the second book, Late to the House of Words. They were really all my choices. She didn't make much input, and I would ask her a question here and there, and then got some native Catalan speakers to read through the entire manuscript because I'm not entirely fluent, and I needed to have native speakers or fluent speakers who could say to me, well, I think you got something wrong there.
Yeah, Katerina, I was surprised to learn that you also ran your translations by some native, as they say, Bulgarian speakers. Now, why is that?
I ran my English language translations with, native born, American native born.
Oh, that, yeah, right.
Yes, but I like to have my Bulgarian translations and my Bulgarian poems just read by people who live there right now and use very contemporary Bulgarian language. And I have been out of the country since '95.
Right.
And you know that language develops and changes, and I want to sound, in the most contemporary way possible.
Right. Actually, I asked this question at the beginning, since you're both poets. So what draws you to translation, except mad, passionate love? What draws you to translating other people's work?
I just thought I wanted to try it. I had tried to translate from Italian, and I felt like, no, I want to go back to my own work. I tried, I think, French. No, I'd rather write my own poems. This was really the first time that I felt so in love with the work. And also I was foolish. I thought, oh, this won't be so hard. The first project was just 60 really short prose poems. I thought, oh, no problem. I'll be able to do this. And of course, it took an enormous amount of work, and I was learning the language, but I just wanted to try it. And I really just loved the work. And I'm not somebody who really writes much prose poetry. She's not somebody who usually writes prose poetry. So it was just this concatenation of different reasons. And I just fell in love with the work, and I thought, I just want to do it.
And for me, something happens when I read a good Bulgarian poem. It's almost on autopilot. In 1 year, I start hearing it in Bulgarian, and the other year I start hearing it in English. So, and by the time I'm done reading it, I know I'm going to translate it, and that it would cost me a lot more energy to deny that urge. And then if I just go ahead and do it, because I think the translation is something that is positive for everybody involved, for the translator, for the poet, for the readers. And yes, someone said these translations are a gift. Thank you, Majda. Yes, it's true that they're a gift, but there is so much benefit for the translator, okay? And that is because you learn so much. It is the closest way of reading that. Another Accents Publishing author said that Jim Cates, you may know him, he is an avid translator and a poet in his own right. So I feel like I have learned so much by translating, because I write like Ekaterina Yosifova, I write like Marin Budakov, I write like some of my favorite poets. And another thing that Barbara, you mentioned Charles Simic. I translate. No, I didn't translate. Well, I did translate some of his poems in Bulgarian. Yes, but I interviewed him once, and we spoke about translation, and he said something that is true, and I hadn't thought about it. He said that translation is resistant to interruption. So basically, you can translate half a poem, then go have lunch, and then go back and translate the other half. If you write your own poem, you cannot do that. So if you, in your schedule, you have just a little bit of, short bursts of time, you can still be very engaged in poetry and, and still work with whatever time you have.
Wow, what a real.
I just want to add one more thing. I would say that there was also a feminist reason. Most translations of poetry are translations of male poets. For instance, the anthology in which I found Gemma's work, it was 6 contemporary Catalan poets, and out of the 6, she was the only woman. And that's very, very typical. And I felt like I wanted to, in my own way, add to the writing of that balance. And so I now have 2 books that I have translated that are by this woman identified poet. And also the Catalan language is just so fascinating to me. And I feel like there's something of a political statement. Both times I had to kind of work to get bilingual editions so a reader can actually see the Catalan. And that is also really important to me, that this language was forbidden under Franco.
Right.
So for many decades, and then also in their past before that, there were many times where it was forbidden to speak, to publish, to educate children in this language. And so it's a kind of a political act to translate it and actually to get the words, the Catalan on one side of the page as well as the English.
And they say that someone who speaks Spanish wouldn't understand Catalan because it's not really in the same kind of family as, say, Provençal or something like that.
No, it's a Romance language. So
Right.
you will hear certain words, but for instance, there were also words that are the same as in Italian. So for instance, in Spanish, the word for window is ventana. And the word in Catalan is finestra, which is the same word in Italian. And yet there are some, and then there are some words like you say bonne nuit in French, you say bonne nuit, for good night in Catalan. And although in all of them, you say hola. So, there are certain words that are the same, and then there are other words that are quite different. It's unique language. It is much more difficult to pronounce. It has a much more complex grammar than Spanish, much closer to French. It's a difficult language. I guess also I was learning it when I was much older too, and it's difficult to learn languages when you're older. So I will never be fluent in it.
I just want to say that translators, even if it's your own mother tongue that you're translating from or into, are the most generous people. And if you've ever been to a conference of writers, AWP, or a conference of translators, the translators are just lovely because they're really advocating for their authors and not for themselves. And I just think that's a beautiful, beautiful definition, because it is a very generous act, although you get a lot from it too. I just want to say that next year we'll have another translation reading, and they're just wonderful. And I thank our translators, and I thank that they've devoted their time and love. And I just hope everyone will come back next year. And by the way, I'm very partial to translating, to getting translators who are women and women poets who are translators. I mean, that was actually the goal of this international line. So anyway, stick around if you want to talk some to the translators.
All right. Thank you, Barbara, for co-hosting with me this evening and for all that you do for the literary translation community. And I'm really glad that you did bring the women's issue to the forefront because we need it in all areas. We want to thank our incredible poet translators, Sharon Dolan and Katerina Stoikova, and our technical guru, Henry, and Michael Davis for his classical guitar. And we have the backstory, the back group, the other parts of Café Muse that put together this all year round. It's Ellen Cole, Henry Crawford, Leah Johnson, Maj Dagama, and of course our founder, Karen Alanier. And most of all, we want to thank you, our audience, because without you, we wouldn't be. Café Muse will return Monday, September 12th, with featured poets Ellen Sazman and Kathy Wolf. Make sure you've registered on our website. It's a one-time only registration. So if you have, we'll be sending you the link. And if not, please register. Before we go, we want to encourage you again to buy Barbara's book, Sharon and Katerina's book, and of course, donate to Café Muse in support of the reading series. So good night from all of us at Café Muse. Stay safe and be well.